What's up, y'all, and welcome back. My name is Jake Towell, and this is my art series where I share with you guys some art pieces throughout my art career. And if you haven't seen last episode, I'm starting to share some illustrations, characters, designs from my I Spy book. And today's a very special piece, as it is the first illustration in my I Spy book. The first page, well, not the first page technically, but the first actual page where you're seeking and finding objects within the cluttered space. And I'll put on screen that page itself. And again, in the future, once I go through all the illustrations of this book, I will be dropping a video on in depth on this book through and through, but there's just a little sneak peek at this page specifically. This piece, if you couldn't tell, or if you could tell, is Egyptian. It has an Egyptian theme. The title of this piece is called Egypt, but that's not very fitting with all my titles. I'm just going to call this one Egypt, the Endless Dunes. So without further ado, let's get right into the sketch phase. So as you can see, like right away, though there's green objects within the sketch phase, just ignore that. Ultimately, those are the actual hidden objects in the book that I writ in to find and seek out, but they're just green just to remind me which ones were which and make sure they really blend in, I guess at the time. But overall, the sketch phase is not the cleanest sketch phase I've ever had. Usually, like I said, the cleaner it is, the more I had an exact idea on exactly what I wanted to do. But there was a lot riding on this book at the time, and this is my first illustrated page, so I was trying to really get a lot of concepts down. There's a lot of things missing from the final render from this, and a lot of things that also I didn't even bring into the final render from this. And we can talk about that obviously when we get to the fully rendered image. But overall, it's a pretty solid sketch. You can generally see where I was going with most things, and it doesn't really matter in the end. We got the end result we wanted, but it's not the best sketch phase, but it still looks pretty cool. So let's get right into the line work phase. Yeah, so this line work, super clean. I mean, again, so much was riding on this book to be as good as possible, so I really paid attention and really tried to hone in on my style and line work to make the best product possible. And there's so much going on with this one, and for an I Spy book, you want it to be cluttered. You don't want to find these objects so easily, and so I really had to think about where things should be placed and how they overlap and what's in front of the other. Looking at this line work phase, I did a fantastic job doing that. It's super clean and super full without being too distracting, and dropping that color in there really made it what it is. But thanks to this really clear and clean line work, it was a really cool piece in the end. So without further ado, so much to talk about, and I haven't really brought myself back to this piece since I made it, so I'm really excited to talk about it, the fully rendered image. We got a lot of just absolutely beautiful colors. I really tried to make the theme, the colors, really fit the areas I was illustrating, and you'll see later on when I post the videos on the other pieces in other locations like Japan and the Caribbean, that I used a lot of colors that kind of portrayed that area and really gave that vibe of that landscape. There's a lot of artifacts obviously in here that are historically accurate, especially for my book. I tried to be historically accurate with the artifacts themselves, so I don't remember the actual names of a lot of this stuff. I will tell you things are legit Egyptian artifacts. I mean, obviously this is very stylized, but a lot of this stuff is real things that are Egyptian practices or from Egyptian culture. So I guess let's just start on the top left. We have this really cool eye. If you've seen anything Egyptian, this eye always shows up, and I put a little twist on it. I gave it some teeth and a mouth, which is pretty cool, and it's hooking around this hook and flails, which this is called, and that's one of the objects I'm trying to find in the I Spy book. Spoiler alert, I guess. And it's kind of cool because this eyeball is like a symbol, yet I gave it life, as it has eyeballs are living things. So I gave it a mouth, I gave it teeth, and I gave it a brain, which is pretty cool. Coming out of this eyeball though are these like green tubes that mimic a lot of resemblance to the Hook Chomp City, and where I was going with that piece. If you haven't seen that video, go check that out. And that's actually creating these clouds, these cloud monsters. So there's one up there, and then there's one right there. So let's break down the one coming out to the right. We got a couple of rings in here, lots of gold in Egyptian culture, so adding these rings, if you've seen any of my videos from this era, adding these rings was something that was just a part of my illustration illustration style at the time. I always illustrated rings, and I found this theme to be very useful in regard to that. So there's a lot of rings within this cloud, which is pretty cool. We got the mouth up here in the corner, and we got another hole coming out of this monster here, and it's spearing through the heart of this object, which is also another object I asked for you to find in the book, going through the heart, around this eyeball, into the brain of the top of this pyramid. But we'll get to the pyramid. So that's that cloud. Then we have this cloud down here. He's kind of just housing those artifacts within him, but he ain't doing too much. We also got a mouth down there, so that's pretty cool. Moving to the pyramid, because this was ultimately where I started. I mean, you can't do Egypt without a pyramid. I wanted it to be crazy. I wanted it to be a monster mouth, and as you can tell, just the traditional Jake Towell illustration mouth. I really made Egypt and these pyramids my own, and there's tons of things going on with this pyramid. We got his tongue going into the sand, which is pretty interesting. Talking about some things different from the sketch phase, there were two skulls right here, and I decided to put grass instead, and I think adding that little bits of green actually really helped for the overall vibe, but that's just one thing that's changed. We got his own eyeball here going in and out through his mouth. Self-damage, I suppose. We got another eyeball here, and this is the one that I talked about earlier, so it goes up and in and out and winds around a lot of these rings around this sword into the top of the pyramid, and then around and then the ring and then around the spear, like we were talking about before. Another thing about this pyramid, he's got no top to this joint because it's being picked up by this purple hand. Well, I guess this is his own hand. He ripped his own head off, and then you can see his brain sitting at the bottom of it, which is pretty cool, and that's just really a funny detail overall. And it's implied that he has another hand, obviously, and that hand's holding up the top of this pot, which is the artifact here, and this is also what Egyptians use to house organs. So that's one of the artifacts that I put in the book to find, and that's like a real artifact in Egyptian culture. Kind of around that purple arm is like another Egyptian artifact. You know, I tried to put in as many as possible. Lots of them aren't actually what you seek and find. Obviously, if you've seen the sketch phase where all the green ones are at, but these are very historically accurate items. Obviously illustrated in my style, of course. Another thing coming out, well, I guess going in, is these like Egyptian pots with snakes in them, which I found was a part of the Egyptian culture, a lot of snake stuff. And anyways, this snake very coolly illustrated. He's very liquidy, windy around these rings, goes into the pyramid, out the bottom of the pyramid, and those rings follow, which is really cool. And down here where you can see his head, and he's getting speared by something else too, but we'll obviously get to that. So yeah, that's the pyramid overall. It looks pretty dope. Really pleased on how that turned out. I have this pillar here, like this architectural Egyptian pillar. To say that these are real Egyptian symbols is completely incorrect. I made them up, but I think they illustrated them off the top of my head, and I know I did this just one go. I was like, well, I'm just gonna go crazy with this little design of Egyptian symbols, and I really made it my own, and they look like Egyptian symbols for the most part. I mean, unless you're a historian and know exactly what Egyptian symbols look like, you're not really gonna tell the difference. But coming out of that is another purple hand you can see winding up, and it's holding this sword, which is a pretty cool sword. And kind of like my art video on skewer, it's this sword that has a 90-degree bend, and you can see it cuts up and then left and then right and then through and then in that top of that pyramid and out the top there, which is pretty cool. A lot of things inspiring from old illustrations I did at the time, such as that, and like I said, Hook Chomp City with these smoke tubes. So moving down to the right, we have another artifact. Again, don't really know its name, but I put that in the sand just to throw off, you know, people looking for something regarding those specific colors. You know, there's so many things that my artifacts I'm really seeking people to find have the same colors, so adding a lot of objects in here that were the same colors to throw people off was definitely the move. You can see that purple hand's going in the sand, out, and that's the one holding on to that. And the other one's going down and through and grabbing this skull, but we'll get there because here we have my rendition of the Egyptian pharaoh, which is pretty cool. If you don't have the pyramids, you at least got to have the pharaoh. Ultimately, I had both. You can see that the pyramid's tongue actually went in the sand, like I said before, and it's actually coming out of the sand and licking the top of this. Actually, it's going through it looks like. So it's going into the top of this pharaoh's head, that lion pharaoh. I forget the actual name of it, but it's going in his head there and popping out the bottom, getting hooked on this ring with his own tongue. These two tongues are combined. So it's a really cool detail that I forgot about till now. That's really cool. Always trying to tie things together in my illustrations. So here we have a really cool rendition of the pharaoh. He's more alive though. He's not a stone statue. He's got teeth, eyes, and a tongue, like I said. And he's got a snake tongue, also a snake on his helmet protruding out with the tongue wrapping around through some more Egyptian artifacts down and around into the third artifact that I try to have you guys find. But anyways, is going through that, through the brain of this skull guy who's in this sarcophagus. As you know, Egyptian sarcophaguses. Tongue goes down in the sand, out the sand, through another artifact, Egyptian artifact, up and around and through, and by this other snake. But I guess we already talked about it. Their sarcophagus, this tomb, you know, lots of stuff like that in Egyptian culture. Popping out the bottom is the guy who was in it, the skull, and dripping out of that is his brain. Does that make any sense? No. Do I care? No. Does it look cool? Yes. So that's all I care about, right? Again, inspiration from the skewer video I dropped, splitting this triangle pyramid. So this is another pyramid split open. You can see his brain exposed there in the inside of his head there, holding up the sarcophagus, which is pretty cool. Again, a mouth, again, a tongue. There's the fourth artifact right there, and an eyeballs wrapping around it. Through, we got another bush at the bottom. We got another bendy spear, as you do. This pyramid's also missing his top. And this blood actually has like a fleshy inside, I suppose, and that's what the spear's going through. So that's an interesting illustration. And the top of that pyramid is being stabbed through that ring. So overall, I mean, I'm really, really proud of this piece, and there's so many things going on within it. And when I had my gallery showing, this was one that people really enjoyed specifically. Not their favorite, obviously, but it was very successful, and overall, the theme of Egypt and a great start to my book as the first illustration. So I really, really appreciate y'all for watching. I do have this piece and many, many other pieces up on my imprint store. Link in the description down below if you want prints or posters of my art pieces for yourself. Check out last episode if you haven't. That's the character of my I Spy book that I created. And if you like this video, leave a like. Leave a comment down below, something you really liked or something I missed that you noticed. And if you haven't already, and if you like these videos, please subscribe. I'm not very frequent on this channel. I have a gaming channel I'm very, very frequent on, so I post every Friday on my gaming channel. But I always come back to my art channel because it's so important to me, and my art is so important to me. And I'm really pleased to be sharing this. And again, this is a start of the illustrations pertaining to my I Spy book, and I'm really, really excited to go through those and eventually give a very in-depth video on my book, so stay tuned for that. I really appreciate y'all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.